It is 30,000 years ago. You open your eyes inside a cave, somewhere in what will one day be called France. You have no writing, no government, no wheel. Outside, woolly mammoths shake the frozen ground. Cave lions prowl the tree line. And yet, you are not primitive. You are highly intelligent, deeply social, and you are about to create some of the most extraordinary art the world has ever seen. My name is Red, and today we are going back, all the way back, to life in prehistoric Europe. Not the cartoon version of grunting cavemen, the real story. And it is far stranger, far more brutal, and far more beautiful than you were ever taught in school. Stay with me. Let's set the scene properly. For most of human prehistory in Europe, the continent was locked inside an ice age. Not a single freeze, but a pulse. Ice sheets advanced and retreated over tens of thousands of years. At the last glacial maximum, around 20,000 years ago, an ice sheet 2 to 3 kilometers thick covered everything north of the Thames. Britain was not an island. It was a frozen peninsula attached to continental Europe, with a vast treeless plain stretching across what is now the North Sea. Scientists call this land Doggerland. It was home to herds of reindeer and wild horses. Then, the sea swallowed it. Forever. Europe was not empty during this ice. Anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, had already arrived from Africa by around 45,000 years ago. But they were not alone. For thousands of years, they shared this frozen continent with a different human entirely: Neanderthals. We now know from ancient DNA analysis, confirmed by the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology, that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens interbred. If you are of non-African descent, between 1 and 4% of your DNA is Neanderthal. Think about that the next time someone tells you prehistory is irrelevant to you. It is literally inside you. By around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were gone. Exactly why remains one of the greatest mysteries in human science. Disease, climate, competition, probably all three. And Homo sapiens had Europe to themselves. What they did next is extraordinary. Imagine you are part of a band of hunter-gatherers in the Aurignacian period, roughly 35 to 40,000 years ago. Your group is small, perhaps 15 to 30 individuals. You move constantly, following the megafauna: woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, cave bears standing 2 meters tall at the shoulder, steppe bison. These are not just food sources, they are existential threats. A mammoth hunt required extraordinary coordination. Researchers analyzing kill sites in Ukraine and Moravia have found that these were organized, strategic events, not frantic chases. Groups would drive animals toward natural traps, ravines, river crossings, cliff edges. At the Dolní Věstonice site in the Czech Republic, archaeologists found evidence of a settlement dating to around 26,000 years ago, including the oldest known fired ceramic in human history. A small female figurine, the Venus of Dolní Věstonice, baked from clay mixed with bone ash. Someone 26,000 years ago invented the kiln, not to make pots, to make art. And the diet? Far more sophisticated than anyone imagined. Dental plaque analysis from Neanderthal remains at El Cedron Cave in Spain showed they consumed plants, mushrooms, and tree bark, not for food, but likely as medicine. These were people who understood their environment at a pharmacological level. More recent research on European hunter-gatherers shows grinding stones being used to process wild grains and roots. These people were not just eating raw meat around a fire. They were cooking, they were processing, they were experimenting. Now we need to talk about the caves, because nothing prepares you for what these people created In 1994, 3 cave explorers in southern France lowered themselves into a narrow shaft and discovered a sealed cavern. They named it Chauvet Cave. What they found inside stopped them cold. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, in paintings of lions, rhinos, bears, horses, and mammoths. The images used perspective, shading, and movement. The animals overlapped. Their legs were rendered in sequence to suggest galloping. A panel of lions appeared to charge directly out of the wall. The oldest sections of Chauvet Cave have been dated to approximately 36,000 years ago. That makes them the oldest confirmed figurative cave paintings on Earth, painted 17,000 years before Stonehenge was built, 31,000 years before the Egyptian pyramids. But it gets stranger. The artists appear to have returned to the same caves over generations, sometimes thousands of years apart, adding to the work of their ancestors. This was not casual doodling. This was a deliberate, multi-generational artistic tradition. And the placement matters. Many of the most dramatic images are placed in the deepest, most inaccessible chambers, reached only by crawling through narrow passages in total darkness, by firelight. Whatever these people believed, they believed it intensely enough to risk their lives for it. And the flutes. In the Swabian Jura region of Germany, archaeologists have recovered vulture bone and mammoth ivory flutes dated to around 43,000 years ago, the oldest musical instruments ever found. Someone, in the middle of the Ice Age, sat down and decided that music needed to exist. Then, about 12,000 years ago, everything changed. The ice retreated, Europe warmed, and from the Near East, a new way of life began spreading west: farming. The Neolithic Revolution reached Europe in waves. Early farmers arrived in Anatolia, modern Turkey, and began migrating into the Balkans around 9,000 years ago. They brought wheat, barley, goats, and cattle. They built permanent settlements, and they radically transformed the continent. Ancient DNA studies, particularly the landmark 2015 analysis published in Nature by Hawk et al., show that the arrival of Neolithic farmers caused a near-complete replacement of the hunter-gatherer populations across much of Europe. The original inhabitants, the people who painted Chauvet, were largely displaced or absorbed within a few thousand years. But the transition was not peaceful, and it was not instant. For thousands of years, farmers and hunter-gatherers coexisted across Europe. Genetic data shows minimal interbreeding for long periods. These groups lived near each other, but largely maintained separate social worlds. The hunter-gatherers were taller, with darker skin and blue eyes, a combination we rarely see today. The incoming farmers were shorter, with lighter skin better suited to extracting vitamin D in the lower sunlight agricultural north. Over generations, the genetics blended, and Europe began to look like Europe. And then came the monuments. Newgrange in Ireland, constructed around 3200 BCE, is older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids of Giza. Its internal passageway is perfectly aligned with the winter solstice sunrise. For exactly 17 minutes on the shortest day of the year, sunlight travels the entire length of the corridor and illuminates the central chamber. These people could not write. They had no metal tools, but they understood astronomy, engineering, and ceremony at a level that still leaves modern engineers puzzled. So what do we take from all of this? Prehistoric Europeans were not primitive savages waiting to be civilized. They were fully modern human beings, grieving, celebrating, creating, exploring, operating at the absolute edge of what their world allowed. They crossed frozen plains to hunt animals the size of trucks. They crawled into the deepest darkness of the earth to paint images so powerful we still feel them 36,000 years later. They invented music, not because survival demanded it, but because something inside them demanded it. The oldest art in Europe is not a record of primitive life. It is proof that even at the very beginning, in the cold, in the dark, with nothing but firelight and bone, human beings were already reaching for something beyond survival. They were already asking the questions we are still asking today. Who are we? Why are we here? And what should we leave behind? If this video moved you, hit subscribe, because we are going even deeper next time, into the Bronze Age collapse, the mystery migrations, and the sea peoples who nearly erased the ancient world. You do not want to miss it. I'm Red, and this has been Before Civilization.